Today we're going to be doing something different. As you know, I have a nice program to design boxes, but in a custom environment, it kind of failed me. It didn't exactly have all the features inside of the program that I wanted. So I've added a few more to assist us in producing custom boxes. So what is a custom box? Well, usually when I do art, I start off with a design in my head, and I cut some wood, I take a look at it, and I decide what I want to put on it. And I do that from the relationship of the box is already in process. I've already cut the bones of the box, and now I'm just going to put the art on the box. Okay, so that's what I normally do for my artistic boxes. But when we're starting off with a custom box, now we have to worry about customer criteria. So what is the customer going to tell me? Well, first of all, he's going to tell me, this is what I want on the box. And I'm going to tell him, I can't do that. And then we're going to have some back and forth until he finally comes up with some type of art that I can put on the box and that he's happy with as well. Then the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to discuss woods. And I'm going to tell him what type of woods I think should be on the box. Then the final and the most important part is, what is he going to do with the box and what is the size? I try to talk customers out of big boxes if they're going to use them as presents. Because if you give a box to somebody else, you don't know what the criteria is that they accept as useful. A big box tends not to be really useful for most people. They just don't have the place inside of their environment to put a box. And since you put all this work into the design and the finishing of a box, you don't want it hidden away in a corner. So I really try to talk customers into boxes a little bit like this size or bigger. And as you can see, it's pretty small, 5 inches by 4 inches by 4 inches. That's a good size box. Customers tend to want to, first of all, buy this type of a box if I put it in an art gallery. And second of all, it's a useful box. They can put some small trinkets in it. And it's a good display in the living room on a shelf or in a bedroom on a dresser. It doesn't take up a lot of room. It looks really good. So that's some of the criteria that I use to design a box. So size is very important. Then the other thing that I've been running into lately is, well, I want a box to put so-and-so in, or I want a box to put this in. And my latest one was, and believe it or not, this is the weirdest one, but I want a box to put a remote control in. And I looked at him and I go, what? I go, and he goes, yeah, I want a box that I can have on the table and I can put my remote control in. Okay, so I started thinking about that and I go, well, okay, you got to give me more information now. You got to tell me what the size of the remote control is. So I know, okay, how it's going to fit inside of a box. And then that will determine how big of a box it is. And then that might tell me that the art that you're telling me that you want on the box just looks tacky. And I can't do that for you. I will, work you through that process. So I didn't have anything in my program that would allow me to work from the inside out of a box. All my programs that I designed so far take the box with the size already made and then work the process. Okay, so I made some modifications to my stock shapes program. I did several functions on the stock shapes program that made it a lot better for me to do something like that. Okay, now if it's not going to be holding a remote control, a lot of times the customer might want a little tray on the inside. So knowing all the dimensions ahead of time, now I can tell, okay, can cut you a tray for the inside of the box, and let's see what the dimensions of the tray are. So, the tray could be this big, obviously not for this box, but the tray could be this big, and I want to know how many compartments you want. I want to know how many vertical compartments you want, And then I'll ask him, okay, do you want a leather bottom or a felt bottom or a paper bottom or what the bottom is? And we work out all these details. Once I have all that details done, I feed them into the program, and all of this material then comes out. It tells me how big of a box to make, and I generally don't burn my boxes on a laser as far as cutting them out. I have a box jig and a dado blade that I do my box joints on. But all of the other things I do, the engravings, the inlays, I also do the entire tray on the laser. So given that process, let's go ahead and start seeing what the program does and how that will help me create a box for the customer that he will like. This is my stock shapes program that I use to do, well, a lot of things. And I'll just give you a quick summary here of functions before we get into actually making the box that I talked about. So over here I can make trays, and these are insets for my boxes. So you can tell it the length, width, how many compartments to make, all kinds of information about it. I can make stepper motor mounts, though this is probably more technical and I use it infrequently. Bottom maker, this lets me make bottoms for boxes. This is a protector, and what this does is it makes cardboard boxes. So this gives me my outline and my dotted cut lines here so I can do a fold on the box. Puzzler, that lets me generate puzzles, and that's a fun thing to do. And then the volume calculator lets me make a box based on the amount of volume, which is kind of useful if you're making urns for ashes, for cremations. They'll give you a volume, and then you can calculate out exactly how much box you need to contain that volume. But what we're going to be talking about today is the rough box portion. And what that does for me is it lets me calculate out all the frameworks of the box. And normally I do outside dimensions. And then this would tell me the width of the box, the sides, how thick the wood is that I'm going to use for the front, sides, and back, and how high it's going to be, plus some overhangs. Now the interesting part is that most of my woods are not the same thickness. I might have some scrap woods of this thickness and some woods of that thickness, and when I put it together in a box, all these varying thicknesses, work for me. So when I'm doing my designs, you can see that these blue lines here inside these areas, that shows me where I can put a design. So I know I can't put a design here because that's where I'm going to have my box joint, but I can have a design over here. So this gives me some type of a framework to do my artwork. Okay, but for this particular premise, we're going to be wanting to design a box with the insides being the guiding factor. So for this particular customer, we're going to put a remote in here. So what we're going to do is the inside has to contain a remote that's 6.5 inches. So let's give them a ½ inch leeway there. So let's make this 7 inches. And you can see that it automatically adjusted all the values here. And for the width of the box, let's say 4 inches. Or no, let's 3. No, let's go 4 inches on that one. So that's 4 inches, and that gives us that value. Okay, now for the height, we really don't need a big height, so let's just do 3 inches. So now I've got all my measurements. But now let's do the next set of measurements, which is the woods. So the front thickness, I'm going to make a pretty good size one, so I'm going to do a ½ inch measurement over here. So that's 12.7 millimeters. And then the sides are fairly thinner. Let's stay with the 10 millimeters. And the back is also going to be fairly thick. So let's say 7/16. So that gives us all the information I need to do cutting the box. Um, so it automatically generates the sizes I require, the buffer strips, which are these blue lines, and it generates a top for me. Now the top, I can have overhangs on, which are over here. 3 millimeters for overhang on the front, 5 millimeters for overhang on the sides. I like that because I do like a little bit of an overhang. So these will now give me all the dimensions I need to cut a box. So once I'm done with this, now we transfer the design over to LightBurn. And that's fairly simple to do. We go into the setup, and since I'm not worried about cutting it because there's nothing here to cut, I'm not going to cut anything of these dimensions on a laser. I'm going to actually just use it as my inlays. I'm going to do an export, and I'm going to export it directly to LightBurn and create the file. It doesn't take very long to create the file, and before you know it, bang, all of this information is now transferred over to LightBurn. So let's take a look and see what we got here. Okay, other than the mess up on these dimensions, we now have all of the outline. You can see all my values I can cut. Let's go ahead and put something on the front. Now, the customer wants a design on top, and for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to use the design that he gave me. So let's do a file, import, and let's look for the design, which I have in this transfer thing. And the design is this one over here. So let's open that up. And you can see that it's pretty big design right now. So I'm going to first of all hit the Alt-T key, and what that's going to do is it's going to trace it out for me. So I can, these lines over here are the tracing. I'm going to say OK to that. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move it out of my way. I'm going to get rid of my image, and I'm going to put it onto the top over here. Now my top is 213 across by 104.6. So let's do something that makes this thing really cool. So what was my numbers again? 213. So since I want it in the entirety over here, I think I'm going to just do probably 180. Let's see how that looks. Oh, that doesn't look too bad. And I'm going to move it down and center it. So to center it, all you have to do is click on that, then you click on this button over here for center, and it looks like it's centered, so that's okay. Now that still doesn't look right to me, that's still a little bit too big. So let's knock it down to 160. And that's probably too big too. Let's go down to 140. And I'm going to bring this up so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, that's a lot better. So the next thing I want to do is I want to put, I'm going to play around with it, putting that. And let's make sure that that is centered up. So I'm going to do that and center. Okay, that looks that looks a lot better. But it's still a little bit off. So let me do a radius over here. And I'm going to do a radius. Let's see what we can do. Now let's do a little bit more than that. Okay, now that looks a lot better. So since I want to do this as a fill, I'm going to use this as a line, and I'm going to do that as that color, that layer. Okay, now I'm going to take the Roku and I'm going to do that as a fill. So I'm going to do it as, let's say, that layer there, fill, and I'm going to change this over to a fill. Now let's do it on that layer. Okay, yeah, that looks about right. So we're going to do centered box with a line around it, and we're going to do the Roku TV on in the middle of it. So let's see how this is going to look. So we don't want to output the corner there, but everything else is good. Let's put this over here and go Window Preview, and that looks exactly like what I want to do with the box. So very easy. We used the program over here to create the bounds of the rough box. And once we had that, we transferred it over to the LightBurn program. And then we brought in an image and we finished it out. And that's about it. We're done. Now I could repeat that for images they want for the front and the left and the right. And I can start burning and create this. And because I got the sizes right, I can use that, cut that out on my saw, and then everything should fit. So that's a quick introduction to only one feature of the box, a creating program. Thank you for listening.